The Sultan is looking at you, not past you, not through you, directly at you. And for 1 second you feel something that feels almost like being seen. Then he moves one hand, one small gesture, and you know exactly what he wants done. No words, no order out loud, nothing that anyone in this room could ever describe. You walk out, and the man whose name was just decided is sitting in the corridor outside. He looks up at you and smiles. He thinks you are bringing him good news. You know what you are actually bringing him, and you cannot warn him. Not because you are scared, because your body has no way to warn anyone. That is exactly why they picked you. History calls them the Dilsiz, the silent ones, deaf and mute servants of the Ottoman Sultan, men who could not hear and could not speak. That is what the books say. But that is not what this was. Think about what the Ottoman Sultan actually needed. More than gold, more than soldiers, more than land. He needed to make decisions that nobody could ever prove he made. He needed men who could carry out those decisions without a single word passing between them. Men who could never give testimony, because their bodies had no way to give it. The Dilsiz were not ordinary servants. They were the best solution ever built to the most dangerous problem of total power. How do you act without leaving evidence? How do you decide things without witnesses? You find men whose own bodies answer both of those questions, forever. And here is what makes this worse than it first looks. The Sultan did not just find this system and use it. The Ottoman court built it on purpose. Over many generations, they improved it, expanded it, built rules around it. This was not custom. This was engineering. You were its newest piece. And what you do not know yet is how completely it has already started to rebuild you from the inside. Your father kept sheep in a village 3 days east of Bursa. You know exactly what the flock sounded like at dusk coming back to the pen. You know the exact look of the hillside in late summer when the grass turns gold just before it dries out. You know these things the way you know your own breathing, without thinking. You were 12 when you first understood that your silence was different from everyone else. Not worse, not better, just permanent in a way that put a wall around your life that other people did not have. Your mother had made 47 specific gestures to talk to you. You counted them one day. You could read her mood from the way her shoulders sat before her hands even moved. Your little sister made up a game. She would put her hands over her ears and close her eyes and try to talk to you only through touch. She wanted to know what your world felt like. She never quite got there, but she never stopped trying. That trying was its own kind of love. You were 16 when the man from the palace came to your village. He was not scary. He was almost kind. He sat with your father for 2 hours. He talked about positions of honor in the Sultan's house, about how your family's standing would rise. He put a leather pouch on the table. Your father did not open it until the man had been gone for a full hour. When he finally opened it, his hands were shaking a little. He looked across the room at you with a face you had never seen him make before. It took you a few days to work out what it was. Relief. He felt relief. And in that moment you understood something you had never let yourself think about before. Your silence had always been something your family carried alongside you. Even the people who loved you most had been carrying it the whole time. The man's offer had just lifted it off their shoulders. How could you ask them to pick it back up? The journey to Istanbul took 11 days. You had never walked more than half a day from your village before. The man from the palace traveled with you. He talked to you by writing short notes on a small wax tablet he had brought just for that purpose. On the 3rd day, you passed through a city bigger than anything you had thought was possible. On the 7th day, you saw the sea for the first time in your life. You stood at the edge of it for a few minutes, and the man waited without rushing you. That felt kind at the time. You understand now what it actually was. You were a delivery. You needed to arrive in good condition. The Topkapi Palace had no scale your mind could use. The first courtyard alone was bigger than your whole village. Men moved through it with the quick focus of people who knew their exact job inside something much bigger than themselves. You were taken to a small group of other young men. 6 of them. All deaf, all mute, all between 15 and 20. All from different parts of the empire. All wearing the same slightly overwhelmed look you recognized because you were wearing it too. An older man came and welcomed you. He spoke in a sign language you had never seen before. Not your mother's 47 gestures. Something completely different. Formal. Exact. With signs for things your home gestures had no words for at all. He showed you it had a sign for every room in the palace. A sign for every important official. A sign for every kind of order the Sultan might give. It was a full and complete language. More sophisticated than anything you had ever used. It was also completely useless outside these walls. You did not understand that second part yet. Within 3 months, you were better at palace sign language than you had ever been at your mother's 47 gestures. It had more words, more detail, more ability to say complicated things. In some ways, it was genuinely better. This was not by accident. The palace had spent generations building it, making it bigger, making it feel good to use, making it feel like a step up from whatever rough home system you came with. At the same time, your mother's gestures were already starting to feel small, imprecise, like trying to read in bad light after someone has given you a lantern. You started thinking in palace language before you even noticed it happening. You started dreaming in it not long after. Nobody forced this. Nobody took your old language away. It just became the old version the way a child's way of doing something becomes the old version once you learn the adult way. The palace had watched this same process happen with every new arrival for 200 years. They knew exactly how long it took. They knew the exact point where the home language stopped feeling like home and started feeling like something foreign. And they had built the palace sign system to make that happen faster. More words, more daily use, more reward for being good at it. Your mother's gestures had your mother in them. The palace language had the most powerful court on earth. That was not a fair competition. And nobody needed to force the result. You stand at the Sultan's left shoulder during private meetings, close enough to feel the warmth coming off his robes. You watch men who run armies choose every word with the careful control of someone who knows the wrong one ends everything. You watch the Sultan's face while they talk. You learn to read it in ways his own advisors cannot, because they are too busy watching their own words to study his face. A small tightness around his eyes means the answer is no. A particular stillness in his hands means someone is about to move up. A breath through his nose that is barely there means the conversation is finished and the person still talking does not know it yet. You carry all of this completely alone. There is no one to share it with. The other Dilsiz carry their own weight of palace knowledge the same way. You see each other across rooms. You share the small specific gestures of people who understand each other's position exactly. But there is an unspoken rule between you. You never share what you actually witnessed, not because anyone told you not to, because you all understand on your own that the knowledge itself is what makes you dangerous. What you carry in your head is the most valuable and most deadly information in the entire empire. Sharing it makes both of you targets. The silence is not something the palace forces on you. You force it on yourself, because that is always the most sensible choice. The palace designed things so that the sensible choice and the trap choice would always be the same thing. You can see how the system works. But seeing it does not give you a way out. There is a ceremony when a new Dilsiz arrives. The older ones gather together. The new arrival gets welcomed in palace sign language, shown the correct positions, taught the correct distances to keep from the Sultan in different situations. You went through this yourself when you arrived. Now you help run it for others. And every time you watch a new young man from some provincial village standing in that courtyard with that particular look of overwhelmed wonder on his face, you feel something you cannot quite name. It is not pity. It is closer to recognition. You remember standing where he is standing. You remember the sea on the seventh day. You remember your mother's 47 gestures and how complete they felt before you knew there was another language. You want to say something true to him, but your hands only know how to give him the rules, the correct distances, the right signs. What is actually true about this place is not something palace language has words for, and even if it did, you would not say it, because staying quiet is always the sensible choice. The system is very good at making the sensible choice and the trap choice the same thing. That is the cleverest thing about it. You are not kept here by force. You are kept here by the weight of every sensible decision you have made since the day you walked in. Here is what historians write about the Dilsiz, and here is what they miss by only writing the surface. The official story says the Ottoman sultans used deaf-mute servants as a practical answer to the problem of keeping palace secrets. That is true as far as it goes. But it describes the system the way you might describe a trap by listing what it is made of without explaining what it catches. The Dilsiz system did not only solve the secret-keeping problem, it solved 3 other problems at the same time that the Ottoman court never said out loud. First problem: how do you create men who are close to the Sultan's private decisions but have no political goals of their own? Answer: choose men who were born outside the world of political power. Men who could never hold official positions, never lead armies, never build the kind of connections through speech that creates political influence. The Dilsiz were not kept away from power because they were deaf. They were chosen because being deaf meant they could never build the kind of power that made other close servants dangerous. Second problem: how do you carry out orders that can never be traced back? Answer: through men who cannot be questioned. A Dilsiz who took part in a killing could not be made to confess it, could not be paid to testify about it, could not be hurt into describing it out loud. Their bodies were the perfect cover for the throne. Third problem. How do you make sure these men never leave and take what they know with them? This is the problem the historians miss completely. And the answer to it was the most sophisticated part of the whole thing. History calls this Ottoman court tradition. But that is not what this was. The palace sign language was not built because deaf servants needed a way to talk to each other. It was built because the palace needed to make sure that communication could only happen inside the palace. Think about what this means when you look at it the other way. Every other person in the Ottoman Empire who left their job could take their skills with them. A good cook could cook anywhere. A good writer could write anywhere. What they knew was portable. The Dilsiz carried something worth far more than any skill. They carried the Sultan's secrets inside their memories. Secrets worth more than any amount of money. Secrets that could break open successions and expose private decisions and pull apart political arrangements that had taken years to build. And the palace sign language made sure that even if a Dilsiz walked out of the walls, what he carried could not be passed on to anyone outside them. He could arrive in any city in the empire holding the most valuable information in the world and have no way to give it to anyone. The language was not a gift. It was a lock. The fine clothes were not respect. They were payment for an asset. Being close to power was not trust. It was the cage built out of something that felt like trust, and it was built specifically for people like you. Not criminals. Not enemies. A 16-year-old boy from a village outside Bursa who loved his family and did not want to be a weight they carried anymore. That boy walked through the palace gates by his own choice. He kept walking deeper in with every sensible decision he made. The system was patient because it had been waiting for boys exactly like him for 200 years. Now think honestly for a moment. Is there something in your own life that you walked into willingly because it solved a real problem? Something that gave you a better way of talking about things than you had before. Something that has slowly made the outside world feel a little less fluent than the inside. If there is, then you already know what this video is really about. You have thought about leaving. Every Dilsi has. Not dramatically. Not desperately. Just a quiet thought that shows up sometimes in the early morning before the palace gets busy. You think through it the way a practical person thinks through any real problem. You are 26 now. You have been inside these walls for 10 years. You have seen things that would change how people understand history if they could ever be told. And here is exactly what the problem looks like. You could walk out of the palace today. Nobody would physically stop you, but you would walk into a city whose language you can no longer speak properly. Your village signs have broken down to small pieces. You can read written Ottoman, but not produce it fast enough for a real conversation. You have no money you can get to on your own. You have no family connection that has not been filtered through palace letters for 10 years. And in your memory, you carry information so dangerous that anyone you managed to tell it to would become a target the moment you told them. What you know is not your freedom. What you know is the strongest possible reason for the palace to make sure you never manage to tell anyone outside its walls anything at all. The door out exists. It always has. But the man who walks through it comes out the other side carrying a weapon he cannot put down and speaking a language nobody understands with no money and no connections and 10 years of distance from every person who might have helped him. The palace did not need to lock the door. It built the exit to be impossible to actually use. That is a more intelligent kind of lock than any key can open. The Dilsiz system officially ended in the 19th century. The thinking behind it did not. Every system that builds up serious power eventually hits the same problem the Ottoman palace hit. How do you stop the people who know the most from using what they know? The modern answer uses tools the Ottomans did not have. Legal agreements that make speaking out a financial disaster. Professional identities built so completely inside an institution that leaving it means losing your sense of who you are. Specialized languages and systems and ways of thinking that are genuinely better than what exists outside and that slowly make the outside world feel less fluent the longer you stay inside. The golden cage is not just a saying. It is a management approach. It is the deliberate use of real advantage, real belonging, real sophistication to make sure the cost of leaving always stays higher than whatever is waiting outside. The Ottoman palace used fine clothes and closeness to power in a language that worked nowhere else. The modern version uses ownership stakes and professional identity and specialist knowledge and the slow replacement of your outside friendships with inside ones. The structure is the same. The materials have been updated, and the most dangerous moment in either version is not the day you arrive. It is an ordinary Tuesday 10 years in when you notice that the outside world has started to feel like somewhere foreign, and you cannot quite work out when that happened. That moment was not an accident. It was always the goal. History called them the Dilsiz, the silent ones. An interesting footnote in the long record of Ottoman court customs, briefly mentioned, quickly moved past. But now you know what it actually was. And the system has been waiting 600 years for someone to call it by its real name. One question stays open. The Ottoman reformers who ended the Dilsiz in the 19th century were very clear about what they were stopping. They were much less clear about what they were putting in its place. The records from that time are surprisingly quiet on that specific question. Quiet in a way that feels familiar if you have been paying attention to this whole story. Next time here, there is a civilization that fell apart so completely that for centuries people argued about whether it had ever really existed. The people living through that collapse did not all die at once. They survived it one day at a time, making sensible decisions inside a situation that had stopped making sense. And the system that was supposed to protect them was the first thing to fail. If you want to be there when that story gets told, subscribe to ZAM History. We are here every Sunday. And if this video changed the way you see one thing in your own life right now, tell me what it was in the comments. The algorithm buries channels like this one. Your comment is how it stays alive.